A man in a dark suit and sunglasses boards a commercial flight on the day before Thanksgiving, carrying a briefcase and a plan that will make him either the most successful hijacker in American history or a corpse lying somewhere in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. 3 hours later, he'll extort $200,000 from an airline, release all passengers safely, and parachute out of a Boeing 727 into a freezing rainstorm at night, vanishing without a trace. The FBI will launch one of the most intensive investigations in its history, searching for 45 years without ever identifying him. His name, or at least the name he gave, is D.B. Cooper, and the question that has haunted investigators and fascinated the public for over 50 years is simple but profound. Did he survive that jump, or did the Pacific Northwest wilderness claim him the moment he leaped into the darkness? New evidence, deathbed confessions, and scientific analysis are bringing us closer to an answer, but the mystery remains as compelling today as it was in 1971. Welcome back to Crime Scout, True Stories. The D.B. Cooper case is the only unsolved case of air piracy in commercial aviation history. Today we're examining the evidence, the theories, and the recent discoveries that might finally tell us whether Cooper walked away from the greatest heist ever pulled off, or whether his bold gamble ended in death. November 24, 1971, was the day before Thanksgiving, one of the busiest travel days of the year. At Portland International Airport in Oregon, a man approached the Northwest Orient Airlines counter and purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle under the name Dan Cooper. He paid cash, $20, which wasn't unusual for the era before computerized reservations and security screenings. Witnesses described him as a middle-aged man, probably mid-40s, wearing a business suit, white shirt, black tie, and dark sunglasses. He carried a briefcase and a paper bag. Nothing about him stood out. He was unremarkable, forgettable, exactly the kind of passenger who blends into the background. Flight 305 was a short hop, just 30 minutes from Portland to Seattle. After takeoff, the man calling himself Dan Cooper, a name that would later be misreported as D.B. Cooper by media, handed a note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. She initially thought he was hitting on her and tucked the note in her pocket without reading it. Cooper leaned over and said quietly, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." When Schaffner read it, the message was clear and terrifying. Cooper claimed to have a bomb in his briefcase. He was hijacking the plane. He wanted $200,000 in $20 bills, for parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle. If his demands weren't met, he'd blow up the plane. Schaffner alerted the cockpit. The pilots contacted Seattle and relayed the demands. Meanwhile, Cooper showed Schaffner the contents of his briefcase, which appeared to contain red cylinders, wires, and a battery that looked like a bomb. Whether it was real or fake has never been determined. The flight crew took the threat seriously. Cooper was calm, polite, even courteous. He ordered a bourbon and soda, paid for it, and even offered to pay for Schaffner's drink. He wasn't agitated or nervous. He seemed completely in control. Northwest Orient Airlines and the FBI scrambled to meet his demands. They gathered $200,000, marking the serial numbers of all 10,000 $20 bills. They assembled 4 parachutes, 2 primary chutes and 2 reserve chutes, as Cooper had specified. When Flight 305 landed in Seattle, Cooper allowed all 36 passengers to deplane in exchange for the money and parachutes. He kept the flight crew, the pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant. Then he issued new instructions. The plane was to be refueled and flown to Mexico City, but at minimum speed, with the landing gear down, flaps at 15 degrees, and an altitude no higher than 10,000 feet. These very specific requirements suggested Cooper had knowledge of aviation and understood the Boeing 727's capabilities. The crew explained that the fuel range wouldn't allow them to reach Mexico City under those conditions. Cooper agreed to a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. At approximately 7:40 p.m., the aircraft took off from Seattle, heading south. Cooper instructed the remaining flight attendant to join the crew in the cockpit and close the door. He was now alone in the passenger cabin with $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, over the wilderness of southwestern Washington state, D.B. Cooper opened the rear air stair of the Boeing 727, strapped on a parachute, tied the bag of money to his body, and jumped into a freezing rainstorm and complete darkness. The crew didn't know exactly when he jumped. They felt a slight change in air pressure around 8 p.m., and when they landed in Reno and checked the cabin, Cooper was gone. The rear air stair was extended, 2 parachutes remained, and Cooper, along with $200,000 and one parachute, had vanished into the night. The FBI investigation began immediately and became one of the most extensive in Bureau history. They narrowed the jump zone to an area northeast of Portland, near the town of Ariel, Washington, along the Lewis River. This was dense forest, rugged terrain, and in late November, freezing cold with heavy rain. Search teams combed the area for weeks, then months. They found nothing. No parachute, no money, no body, no evidence that anyone had ever landed there. It was as if Cooper had evaporated. The case went cold, but it never closed. Over the years, the FBI received thousands of tips and investigated hundreds of suspects. Some confessed on their deathbeds. Others were accused by family members who claimed to recognize Cooper from the sketches. None of them checked out. Then, in 1980, a breakthrough occurred, though not the kind investigators hoped for. A young boy named Brian Ingram was on a family camping trip along the Columbia River, about 20 miles downstream from the suspected jump zone. He was digging a fire pit in the sandy beach when he uncovered 3 packets of badly degraded $20 bills. The serial numbers matched the ransom money given to D.B. Cooper. $5,800 was recovered, but the bills were fragmented, waterlogged, and had clearly been buried for years. This discovery raised more questions than it answered. How did the money get there? The Columbia River was miles from the projected flight path. Did Cooper land in the river and drown? Did the money wash downstream? Or did someone bury it there deliberately? In the decades since, other evidence has surfaced. In 2008, hikers found a parachute buried in the earth near Cooper's suspected jump zone. The FBI examined it but couldn't definitively link it to the hijacking. In 2011, a man came forward claiming his uncle, Lynn Doyle Cooper, was D.B. Cooper. He showed investigators a guitar strap his uncle had owned that allegedly contained particles consistent with the ransom money. The FBI investigated but found insufficient evidence. So the central question remains, could anyone survive that jump? Aviation experts, military parachutists, and forensic analysts have weighed in for decades. The consensus is that survival was possible but highly unlikely. Cooper jumped at night in freezing rain with zero visibility into densely forested terrain. He was wearing only a business suit, loafers, and a thin raincoat, completely inadequate for the conditions. The temperature at 10,000 feet would have been well below freezing. The jump occurred at around 200 miles per hour airspeed, creating tremendous wind force. Cooper took a military-style NB-6 parachute, not ideal for a novice but manageable for someone with experience. However, he also grabbed a dummy reserve chute that had been sewn shut and was used only for training demonstrations. If he'd tried to use it, it wouldn't have opened. This suggests Cooper either didn't know much about parachutes or made a critical mistake in his selection. Additionally, he jumped with the money bag, which weighed about 20 pounds and would have seriously affected his aerodynamics and landing. Military parachute experts have noted that even experienced jumpers would find this scenario extremely dangerous. Jumping at night into unknown terrain with no ground reference, in adverse weather, improperly dressed, and carrying awkward cargo creates multiple failure points. The landing zone was dense forest. Even if the parachute opened correctly, Cooper would likely have landed in trees, potentially suffering serious injuries or becoming tangled in branches. The odds of walking away unharmed are estimated by experts to be less than 10%. Yet, no body has ever been found. Extensive searches immediately after the hijacking and subsequent expeditions over the decades have turned up no skeletal remains, no parachute, no physical evidence of Cooper's demise. The Pacific Northwest wilderness can certainly hide bodies, the terrain is vast and difficult. But 50 years is a long time, and searchers have been thorough. The money on the Columbia River beach is perhaps the strongest evidence that Cooper didn't survive. The degraded condition and burial pattern suggest the bills were in the river for extended periods, possibly carried by currents from upstream where Cooper may have landed in the water and drowned. But even this evidence is ambiguous. Some researchers believe the money was planted there, that Cooper buried it deliberately to throw off investigators. In 2016, the FBI officially closed the active investigation, announcing they would no longer accept tips unless physical evidence was presented. They've concluded, unofficially, that Cooper probably didn't survive, though they acknowledge they have no proof. The case remains technically unsolved and open to new evidence. Several recent developments have renewed interest. Advances in DNA analysis have allowed investigators to extract genetic material from particles found on Cooper's clip-on tie, which he removed during the flight and left on the plane. The DNA analysis revealed rare earth elements suggesting Cooper might have worked in the aerospace or chemical industry, narrowing the potential suspect pool but not identifying him. This has been Crime Scout, True Stories. D.B. Cooper pulled off the only unsolved act of air piracy in American history, and whether he lived to enjoy his $200,000 or died in the wilderness moments after his daring jump remains one of the greatest mysteries in criminal history. Subscribe for more cases where the truth is still out there, waiting to be discovered.